Welcome back. It's been a while, but welcome back, and thanks to Jhon Duran. I mean, what an incredible game. Aston Villa versus Bayern Munich in the Champions League, the second fixture of the new league system. And it was a brilliant game. Obviously, Aston Villa won their first game against Young Boys. Bayern Munich also won their first game 9-0. Absolutely ridiculous match. But both teams came into this game with 3 points on the board, but both teams equally wanted the win. Obviously, it's the Champions League. And Bayern Munich are set for a massive upset. I mean, Aston Villa absolutely smashed it out of the park this evening, or yesterday night. It was a sensational game. Tactically, there was a lot of interesting moments. There was also a few highlights. It only finished 1-0, but there were some key moments in this match. And there's certainly a lot to unpick, and that's what we're going to do in today's video. You're going to have to stick with me though, because I'm going to do it in a little bit of a backwards way. I'm not going to go straight into Bayern Munich with the ball, Aston Villa with the ball. We're actually going to start by taking a look at the average positions of the first half of the game. Now, granted, Aston Villa actually started with Ramsey on the left and Philogene on the right, but he went off injured, so we're just taking him out of the equation for now. This was the average positions, and you can already see Aston Villa and Bayern Munich are both playing very compact. Bayern Munich kind of going for a man-for-man system here. And it kind of worked to their favour because they were very aggressive, and it kind of limited the routes that Aston Villa had to transition. And that's what Bayern Munich want. Vincent Kompany set his team up to be very aggressive, play high up the pitch. And this goes to show that you can't be aggressive in your press, you can't be compact, and you can't also keep a high line all at the same time successfully without having to make some kind of sacrifice. Kompany set his team up in a way that's very similar to what Arsenal are doing at the moment. Very aggressive, high line, man-for-man pressing, but can also drop into a zonal system. It's similar to what Jurgen Klopp did as well at Liverpool a couple of seasons ago with his counter-pressing, and it reminds me a bit of what Fabian Herzl is doing at Brighton as well at the moment. Very high lines. And obviously if it works, then great, you're in a brilliant position to attack, but if you get caught out, you are in a lot of trouble. And we realised Aston Villa kind of tried to take advantage of that multiple times today. And that is kind of where most of the issues came for Bayern Munich. There was a couple moments where arguably Upamecano, and I think he should have been sent off, he was caught out. He managed to recover by committing a foul on Ollie Watkins, but for me there was 2 yellow card offences there that he should have been sent off for, both pretty much identical to the other. But to be fair, for the most part, Aston Villa attacked pretty well, defended pretty well, and Bayern Munich also kind of did the same. Bayern Munich kind of managed to manage their issues. I think they knew that they're going to get caught out by the high line, especially with Ollie Watkins, but they were able to manage it relatively well. The only main moment in the first half was obviously that Pau Torres goal that did eventually get disallowed. And we know Aston Villa at set pieces are simply sensational. They are so good, especially if they don't win the first ball, they're always onto the second ball. They're always winning their duels straight after a set piece, and that is what makes them so good. And we saw it again today. And I know it was ruled out because Ramsey was offside, but McGinn plays the ball in. A really interesting setup from Aston Villa in a massive long line across the pitch. They almost had a puddle of players on the left and a puddle on the right, with Ollie Watkins then kind of being the free man to attack the centre in case there was any rebound in the middle of the goal. And the ball from McGinn came over the top. Jacob Ramsey then kept it in, played it back to Digne, and his cross was really good because it went into a dangerous area, but it was so high and whipped that Neuer couldn't come and claim it, especially as it was going away from his goal. And it landed in a really precarious situation where you can see in the moment where it falls to Philogene. He managed to pick up a little pocket of space, and I think it was almost too dangerous of a situation for Kimmich to go and press him as well, because if he commits a foul then it's a penalty. So Kimmich kind of holds back in not going to try and win that ball, allowing Philogene to kind of have a moment with it, knowing that he's surrounded by Bayern Munich players. But I think what you can tell from this moment, and I thought the same thing, it looks like Philogene's going to do an overhead kick, take the bicycle kick as an attempted shot on goal. Kimmich, you can tell, also expects that, because the moment the ball drops to about Philogene's head height, a little bit lower, Kimmich jumps, I think expecting the bicycle kick, and he kind of tries to block that off. Obviously, it was then a brilliant touch. Davies, I think, loses his marker a little bit. I don't know whether he was meant to be tracking Pau Torres or whether he was getting ready for an attacking transition. Or thinking that it's going to go out for a goal kick or something. But Davies loses Pau Torres, and obviously Pau Torres is then there to convert the shot. And it was a good finish. It was a really interesting moment, and I think it showed real intent from Aston Villa. It showed what they were going to still play their way, and they were really acute with their touches inside the box, and they created a lot of good quality chances. And Bayern Munich managed to deal with it pretty well. Granted, they got lucky on this occasion. it was the second half where we saw a lot of changes. And now we're going to take a look at what the team set up like as well. So we're going to start with how did Bayern Munich attack when they had the ball. So Aston Villa defended in a pretty compact 4-4-2. We know that's what they like to do in all their games. They are very good at it. They stay compact, they stay tight, very small distances between the lines. Makes them difficult to play through. And Bayern Munich did struggle for the most part, except for one main man, which was Michael Olise. But Aston Villa were happy to let one of the centre-backs have the ball. If it came to this situation, Tielemans would jump and it would look something like this. But they stayed not man-to-man all the time. They dropped between a man-to-man and a zonal system, depending on where the ball was. But they were more than happy normally to let at least one of the centre-backs have the ball. Normally, both centre-backs had time and space. Obviously, Philogene then pressed Lema, who actually was quite aggressive today, playing up in these positions. But we'll have a look at that in a minute. Aston Villa were very good at allowing Bayern Munich to have the ball, but with the players that aren't going to cause any threat. Obviously, it gets to a point where you have to start applying pressure to the ball, but for the most part, Upamecano and Kim Min-jae aren't really going to cause any real dangerous moments. But Aston Villa were happy to let them have the ball, and that's absolutely fine. There was no problems with that. What I found really interesting is the role of Joshua Kimmich. He almost played like a Toni Kroos, Trent Alexander-Arnold kind of role today. And I think he's been doing it for most of the season. I haven't watched Bayern Munich loads, but from what I have seen, he has been doing it a fair few times. He's not starting at right back, actually. It's Konrad Laimer that's starting at right back. So he's not necessarily inverting, but we know he has played right back in his past. But he's kind of picking up this centre defensive midfielder position, but it means he can drop back into a back three, both centrally. Sometimes Upamecano would come central, and Kimmich was either in this position, or if Pavlovic went high, Kimmich would just take a more central position. He was kind of occupying all the positions across that back line. He was the first receiver in the first phase of the transition, so when Upamecano has the ball, it was Kimmich that was normally dropping a lot deeper to try and get on it and then try and find a ball out wide, or to try and move try and continue the transition on. They're the words I'm trying to say. But it meant that Kimmich had a lot of time to dictate the play. He found a lot of good passes in between the lines when he could, and I think he was the main person for Bayern Munich that tried to make a lot of stuff happen. And it was a really interesting approach. I really liked what he offered. I think Aston Villa kind of dealt with it well enough. I do think Kimmich had opportunities to maybe create a few better chances, but for the most part, he wasn't a real threat. But I do think his positioning was really interesting. But it meant that they attacked in almost a 2-2-6 in a very high press. So when we go really high up the pitch, Davies and Coman would interchange in who takes up the half spaces on the left-hand side. They were both very active and lively in these positions. One would come centrally, inverting into a half space. Olise obviously attacking, Gnabry and Laimer. But I found it really interesting the role that Olise, Laimer and Gnabry all played. So actually, I'll carry on with Aston Villa in this situation. Actually defended in a 5-3-2. So Pau Torres came a bit more centrally. Digne became a left centre-back of a back three. And then Philogene was the one dropping deeper. And then obviously Bailey, Onana, Tielemans as the midfield three. So it looked something a bit like this. And this shape really limited the spaces that the Bayern Munich attackers had. Olise, Laimer and Gnabry interchanged a hell of a lot, which I wasn't expecting actually. Olise would sometimes be in the right winger, Laimer would come into the half space, Gnabry would be wide. It really alternated a lot. It was normally either Gnabry or Laimer in the half space, and then Olise would almost tuck into a number 10 position. But they interchanged so nicely, they rotated perfectly, and when they did rotate, the other two knew where to be as well. So they clearly trained that a lot of times, and I think it was an effective way of confusing both Digne and Philogene in, do they pick up, does Philogene specifically pick up Gnabry and Digne picks up Laimer, or do they just stick positionally? That was a really interesting rotation that Company had them playing. But Olise picked up almost like a Cole Palmer-esque style of a roaming playmaker. He was everywhere. Every time he got the ball, whether he was playing behind Harry Kane in the number 10, whether he was out wide, he was picking up all these pockets, finding the little intricate passes in between to break the lines. And obviously we saw Gnabry have a really good chance in this position where he should have squared it to Harry Kane, but didn't. But a lot of Bayern Munich's attacks actually stemmed through Michael Olise. And whilst he was relatively quiet, actually I think when you paid more attention to him, he was really good. He was really influential in how they attacked and trying to break down Aston Villa's low block. Obviously, in the end, he got taken off for Leroy Sané, understandably. I think that was more just a fitness, going more direct from Vincent Kompany. But I was really impressed by Michael Elise today, and obviously he forced that brilliant save from Martinez as well. At half-time, we did see Koeman come off as well. It meant Musiala came on. Gnabry kind of went to the left, and him and Davies interchanged on this on that left-hand side. Elise went to the right. Lima was more in the half spaces, and Musiala picked up that Elise kind of position in the second half, where he was kind of trying to be the second striker to Harry Kane. Or actually, Harry Kane would sometimes drop deep and allow Musiala to make the runs in between the centre-backs. Still, it was a similar system, just different profiles. Did it work? Yes. Did it change the game? Not really. I actually think it looked better in the first half with Elise doing that role, but I do think Musiala is unpressable, and that's why he had to be on the pitch. I'm actually surprised he didn't start. But we'll look defensively as well. I think it was more out of possession why Musiala was more effective than in possession, and we'll take a look at that now. So when Aston Villa had the ball and tried to build out from the back, they tried to go in their 4-2-4 formation, which is pretty normal for them. Again, we said that they didn't really change much today, Aston Villa, and they attacked, considering they defend in a 4-4-2, it's then a really transition into a 4-2-4, because it's just the wingers that then push much higher, and the full-backs kind of push a little bit higher as well, trying to pin the wingers a little bit deeper. So it looks something a bit like this. Building out from the back, I thought it was really interesting the role that they put Elise in. Elise wasn't pressing Torres. He wasn't pressing Digne or anyone like this. He was man-marking Youri Tielemans. And I noticed it pretty early on, and I wondered how long it would last. It lasted the entire first half. They man-marked Youri Tielemans. So it actually meant out of possession. Bayern Munich changed a lot. Sometimes they were a 4-4-2. Sometimes it would be Elise. It looked a 4-4-2 like this. Sometimes Kimmich would come wide, and it'd actually be a 4-4-2 like this, where Elise is actually in the right central midfielder position. And actually quite often it was when Tielemans became more central and deeper, it became a 4-3-1-2, or almost like a diamond. And this is where I think Musiala was more effective, because Koeman was a little bit more central in this position. So it was, as you can see, more like a 4-3-1-2, again because Elise was marking Youri Tielemans. So it interchanged, but this is obviously then where Musiala was more effective, because out of possession, he's better as a midfielder than Kingsley Coman was, but the profiles did change. It doesn't really matter too much. Regardless, we'll go back to Kingsley Coman for now. So in their press, Harry Kane sometimes would press the goalkeeper. Normally he was kind of tasked with this position of covering both Carlos and the goalkeeper. It wasn't really an aggressive position from him. He kind of used his cover shadow sometimes to block passes into Onana. Something a bit like this instead. It varied for Harry Kane, but for the most part his task was Diego Carlos. Koeman obviously was on Konsa. Gnabry covered Torres, and Kimmich was normally the one pressing Luca Dean, because Elise was picking up this central position. But then what was really interesting is Pavlovic was the one that would jump onto Onana, and it did leave all this open space at the back, which obviously is then why Upamecano, Kim Min-jae, Davies and Lima all pushed much higher, so that they could keep this high line, because they didn't want these massive distances. And this is crucial, because when we look at the goal that Jhon Duran scored, it is because of this, and we'll get to that. So obviously they tried to pin the Aston Villa attacking line relatively deep still. So the man-to-man looked a bit like this. Pretty standard, nothing really interesting. What I really liked though was that when they committed players higher, the ball would come into Onana, and I really liked, this is a really subtle detail. When the ball came into Onana, he would try and take it over his left shoulder. Instead of taking it this way into a more crowded area where Upamecano can jump, Lima comes across, Kimmich comes deeper, he took it instead over his left shoulder, trying to take Pavlovic out of the game. So then you end up in this situation where Rodgers is making a central run to drag Kim Min-jae central, and now you can see in this area of the pitch, as Onana pushes forward, you've actually got a 3 versus 2 overload for Aston Villa. So Aston Villa are trying to create a numerical advantage, and they do so by Onana taking it over his left shoulder, taking Pavlovic out of the game, and it creates this overload. It didn't actually come to any promise at any point, but the intention was there. And then what I really liked about this is that when this attack didn't work, it meant that they could then recycle the ball back to someone like Youri Tielemans, who could then find these passes where you can see here, here, and here, you've got 3 isolations of 1 versus 1s, and you'd back Rodgers, Watkins and Philogene all in their 1 versus 1s, especially against Upamecano, Kim Min-jae and Conrad Lima. Neither of them are really pronounced one-on-one defenders. It's not like you're facing Virgil van Dijk or someone like that. I'm not saying any of them are bad, but you'd back the Aston Villa attackers in this situation. And we saw a lot of the times it would come to Ollie Watkins. And actually Rodgers would come a bit deeper to try and drag Kim Min-jae out of his defensive position to open up space for Watkins to make these runs. And we saw it a lot. And when Aston Villa couldn't beat the press, they just played direct and it still worked. Upamecano was always the last man on the line. There was always that option to split Kim Min-jae and Upamecano to find that run of Ollie Watkins, because Rodgers pinned Kim Min-jae a little bit deeper, probably not where at Bayern Munich would like him to be, and it opened up all that space for Ollie Watkins to attack. And obviously we saw a few glimpses of that where he could have been through on goal had Upamecano not committed the foul. So it was a really interesting way of them trying to play through the press, trying to create their overloads, but when they couldn't, they were more than happy to go direct. And that is how we saw the goal come about. Remember I said earlier about them distances, how they didn't want that massive distance between their defensive line and then the midfield line. That is where the goal actually came from. So Aston Villa get the ball back with Emi Martinez, and Bayern Munich are really lazy and very slow in getting back into their positions. Emi Martinez plays a simple ball into Pau Torres, and you can see the massive gap between the midfield and the defensive line from Bayern Munich, where there is no one to intercept this pass that then comes through from Pau Torres, and it's a wonderful pass. You can see both wingers are trying to stretch out that Bayern Munich defence, and it opens up the channels for Morgan Rodgers and Jhon Duran to run through. And obviously Jhon Duran is so quick, you'd back him against Upamecano, and he's on the right side of Upamecano as well. So that when that ball comes through, Neuer, I think being Neuer, thinks that he can be the sweeper keeper, tries to come and claim it, misses it. He's in no man's land, and it's just a sensational finish from Jhon Duran. And that just goes to show that direct play. When they couldn't play through the press, they caught Bayern Munich out, especially with their massive distances. The high line kind of caught them out a little bit. They were kind of in no man's land, and it just really, really punished Bayern Munich. And it was a sensational finish. It was such a good goal. No wonder Chelsea have been after Jhon Duran. He has been incredible this season, and I wonder how long it's going to be before he starts wanting first team minutes, before he wants to start starting, sorry. He deserves to be in that first 11, but how do you get Rodgers, Watkins and Jhon Duran all in there? I do think there's a way, but I'm not going to talk about it now. Regardless, brilliant game. Aston Villa tactically on point. Bayern Munich actually tactically, I'd say, were on point as well. There was just a couple lazy moments that kind of cost them, and obviously it cost them the 3 points in the Champions League to Aston Villa. That is a pretty big talking point, but I think it's Vincent Kompany's first loss as well. Fair play Aston Villa, fair play Unai Emery. They are, I think, in the top 3 or 4 of the Champions League at the moment. I wonder how far they can take it. And let me know in the comments below, how far do you reckon Aston Villa will go in the Champions League this year? I doubt they're going to go all the way, but let me know what stage do you think they're going to go out, and who against? Who's going to knock them out as well? Let me know. But anyway, in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I promise content will be back more regularly from now on. And make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and I'll see you all very soon with a brand new video. Thanks for watching.